So here's the reason why your health still sucks despite having access to the best medical doctors at the best hospitals with the best medical insurance. It's all about this document, published over a century ago in the year 1910. So this document wrote the entire script on the type of medicine that you receive. And it's a very long document, over 436 pages long. So I read most part of it so that you don't have to. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to explain to you why this document is such a very important document in healthcare, and the events that led to the publication of the document, and how its implementation changed the entire field of medicine, the entire profession, the entire industry. And that's the type of system that influences your health. So everybody tells you that, hey, only get medical advice from qualified medical professionals. And that's 100%, especially in this era when you have so much information from everywhere. But what nobody tells you is the part where the entire model of medicine that we healthcare professionals use is not the complete picture. Literally, we've adopted a medical system that looks at certain aspects of health and not others. And every time I start having these conversations with people, it automatically gets them split into either one of two groups. The first group is the one that says, oh no, just another conspiracy theory talking about medical industry monopolization by billionaires. And the second group is the actual conspiracy theorists that get excited and say, yay, someone finally spilling the beans on big pharma and medical industry monopolization by billionaires. And let me just spoil it for you. Neither one of these two perspectives is accurate. There is a much bigger story to it. Have you ever wondered why your medical insurance only pays for certain tests, therapies, and procedures and not others? Or have you ever been to a doctor's office? You come back with a lot of pills. Doctor saying, okay, go home and take these 3 times a day for 5 days. And you go home and for some reason you don't take the pills. For whatever reason, maybe you forgot or you ignored them. But after 5 days, you still got better. Was the doctor wrong? Or maybe the opposite scenario where you actually need help with a specific ailment and you've tried different types of medication prescribed by specialists, and after several weeks or several months or several years, you still haven't gotten your health restored. Was anyone wrong in the process? Oh, think about this. If you're someone like me that lives in Africa or people living in different parts of Asia, have you ever wondered why our traditional medicines, the herbs, the roots, the trees, the concoctions, are regarded pseudoscientific or perhaps irrelevant? And some people go to the extremes of calling them evil. Does that ever bother you? So, all these questions are answered by this document. So, over a century ago, in the year 1910, this document was published. And to understand the events that led to the publication of the document, and also to understand why the document is a very important document in healthcare, we need to go way back to when medicine originated, because we need to give it context. Remember, content without context is dangerous. So we are going to go back in history, do some digital archaeology, just so that we avoid misinformation and misinterpretation. So the question is, how far back can you go to trace the origins of medicine? The earliest information that you ever find about the origins of medicine can be traced as far back as the 4000 BCs. That's when you find the Greeks and the Egyptians during the Greek and the Egyptian civilizations. You find writings about what they knew about disease, how they treated sick people. That's when you see the Egyptians using the sun, the herbs, the different types of remedies to treat sick people. But fast forward to 400 BCs, that's when you start seeing Hippocrates. Hippocrates, the person that we actually call the father of modern day medicine. Hippocrates did a lot to medicine, so much that we named the Hippocratic Oath after him. You know the Hippocratic Oath, this oath that we medical professionals take when we are graduating from medical schools. I took that oath. I'm a biomedical scientist. Nurses, physicians, and everyone that's going to be handling actually human beings actually has to take this oath. So Hippocrates said a lot about medicine. He put structure to the role of physicians in healthcare. He said a lot about medical ethics. He described many aspects of disease, how disease happens, many concepts of pathophysiology, and many things that make him deserving of the title, the father of modern day medicine. But the most significant period in all of human history is the period beginning 14th century AD, because this is the period that we call the scientific revolution. This is a period when people started looking at random occurrences in nature and beginning to explain them using the scientific method. So this is a period marked by major advances in scientific discovery, where you start seeing the laws of motion being explained, the laws of gravity, mathematics and calculus, the physics of optics. And what happened in this period was the creation of a new world view and industrial progress, where people now start beginning to understand exactly how things work. And this led the groundwork to modern science. People now could create a world for themselves, a world of observation, a world of experimentation and evidence. People are able to explain things. People are able to put mathematical formula to explain how things work and to predict how things would happen, because they understand the entire process of how everything works. So a worldview built on experimentation, observation, and evidence became the order of the day. So the world moved from random occurrences, spiritual phenomena, to scientific discoveries and an explanation as to how things work. Now, fast forward again to the early 1800s. Now everyone knows science. Now people understand how things work. People now started establishing colleges that taught people science in every industry. But with everything, there's pros and cons. Now, what happened in the late 1800s in medical sciences, it became a very open field where any person could open a college and teach people that would become physicians. And now something had to be done, because healthcare became too toxic and dangerous because it was very unregulated. It is a period where you start hearing things about quack medicine, because everyone could do anything. Imagine going to a hospital and you have this dude that graduated from a 2-year medical school, and they do some little diagnosis on you and they're like, hey, let me cut you and see what's going on inside. That was a Tuesday in the late 1800s. Now, it was too toxic that something needed to be done. So, in 1904, the American Medical Association set up the Council for Medical Education with the sole purpose of improving the type of education that physicians received, because it was way long overdue that something needed to be done. So the Council on Medical Education approached the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching to help them execute this task. The Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching is a philanthropic organization that is well funded because it's associated with a lot of billionaires. Maybe that's where most conspiracy theories come from. But in this case, that's not the case. They needed funding to do that, right? And of course, the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching had a very good track record in improving education standards in many subject areas other than medicine and healthcare. So because of that track record, the Council on Medical Education actually approached the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching to help them execute that task. Now, here's where the story gets interesting for me. It's not about the funding or the method that they use. It's about the person that they selected to execute this task. So the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching chose a man called Abraham Flexner to execute this task. Abraham Flexner was not a medical doctor. He had never been to medical school. He knew nothing about medicine and healthcare, yet he was selected to set the standard on medicine and healthcare. And there's some publications that say he was so unqualified that he himself was baffled about why he was selected to be the one doing the work. But like they say, men will always be men. He accepted the task, and Abraham Flexner, for the next 5 years, went to every single medical college in America, evaluated them, looking at their instruction material, their resources, the type of infrastructure, and many other things, with the sole purpose of improving the type of education. Because if we can fix the foundation, then we fix everything. So if we can fix medical education, we are going to improve medical standards going forward. Now, in the year 1910, the Flexner Report was published. The single most significant outcome of the Flexner Report was the instruction for all medical colleges to use the scientific model to deliver the education so that we can improve medical standards. Remember, we are living in a world where science has become the new normal. You don't just do things randomly, and it makes so much sense. You don't want to just do things without knowing the what and the how. However, that proposition to only use the scientific model in medical education led to the closure of over 75% of all the medical colleges that were training physicians in all of America. So now here's where the problem is. Not all of the colleges that closed down were the ones teaching quack medicines. There was a lot of relevant therapies and procedures and approaches to medicine that were very significant, just that they did not meet the lab-based approach to medicine that the current model was based on. And this current model was practiced by the Johns Hopkins and many other well-funded institutions. So literally we have Flexner adopting the Johns Hopkins model to grade all the medical institutions. And the Johns Hopkins model is the model that's based on anatomy and physiology, biology, pharmacology, bacteriology, and many other things that the Johns Hopkins was already invested in doing. Now, the truth about the scientific model is not disputable. Yes, it makes sense, but then what does not make sense here is the fact that over 75% of all the colleges closed down, literally just because they did not meet the required infrastructure, they were not very well funded, and they did not follow strictly the scientific model. Now that's what led to the propagation of one type of medicine that led to the development and the establishment of allopathic reductionism as the single most accepted model of medicine that eventually received more funding, more support, and it is the one that the American Medical Association chose to regulate. And going forward, allopathic reductionism, this is the approach of lab-based science, the approach where if you cannot see it, you cannot touch it, you cannot test it, or you cannot taste it, then it's irrelevant. And this is where the sun, just because there is no proper lab-based scientific evidence that the sun treats illnesses, it does not form part of endorsed medical therapies. This is the reason why the herbs, the roots, the trees, the concoctions, just because no one has taken the time to investigate the causal effect and how exactly they treat illness, they remain irrelevant. And this is the part where I say Jim Rami in the Boondocks is much wiser than all of us in medical sciences with all our PhDs and our billion-dollar research funds.
The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence.
What?
Simply because you don't have evidence that something does exist does not mean that you have evidence that something doesn't exist.
What?
And let me just be precise here, because this is the part that gets misused in both directions. This is not a smoking gun conspiracy. The American Medical Association genuinely wanted higher standards, and frankly, medicine needed it. But it's worth noticing still that the outcome has got some very significant negative implications. And the closure of all the other non-compliant medical schools does not mean that automatically they were quack medicine. They just didn't have the scientific rigorousness to be able to meet the standards that were set up by the Flexner Report. And now all of us are betting our lives on allopathic reductionism that looks at certain aspects of health that accepts certain theories because of how they've been investigated and not the rest of everything else that actually is useful for us, that makes so much sense, that's very helpful. The natural remedies, the sun, the fasting, exercise, and many other things that we actually call complementary and alternative medicine, including the ones that we call pseudoscientific or perhaps irrelevant. So allopathic reductionism does not come without flaws. There are times when within itself, it's so fragmented that it messes up. Let me just give you a brilliant example of what allopathic reductionism actually does. Let's talk about myocardial infarction, a heart attack. So your cardiologist knows that cholesterol is one of the culprits for heart attacks because cholesterol can cause thickening of your coronary arteries. These are the arteries, the blood vessels that are bringing in blood to your heart muscle to make it pump. So cholesterol can contribute to the blockage of the arteries that results in your heart not receiving enough blood, which it pumps itself. So your heart muscles start dying because of lack of oxygenation, lack of nutrition, and lack of everything because it's not receiving the blood. And then suddenly one day it will just stop beating. Now you have a heart attack. So your cardiologist knows that cholesterol is one of the culprits. So your doctor will say, do not take cholesterol, cut down on cholesterol so that you don't die from a heart attack. So you, being a good patient, you are going to stop taking cholesterol because you don't want to die from a heart attack. But what your doctor did not tell you is the part that cholesterol is a raw material for the synthesis of many hormones in your body. Now you are a 45-year-old man that cannot get your thing up because you don't have cholesterol to make up your sex hormones and many other hormones in your body. And you're in trouble because now you needed your endocrinologist to be able to tell you that information. And as though it ends there, but it doesn't, because now at 65, you can't even remember your wife's name because now you have deprived your brain of cholesterol for many years, that your brain now starts shrinking because cholesterol forms the structural component of the functional parts of your brain. Now with deprivation over time, your brain is now shrinking. So at that time, we actually have a name for it. We call it dementia. But your cardiologist was not concerned about that. Now you need a neurologist to be able to help you with your dementia. And it all started with one concept of cholesterol is a culprit for heart disease. So to avoid heart disease, let's cut down on cholesterol. That is what allopathic reductionism does. We look at cause and effect. So if cholesterol causes heart disease, then cut down on cholesterol. You will need your endocrinologist to look at your hormones. You will need your neurologist to look at your brain tissue, and you'll need your insurance company to pay for all that. And unfortunately, insurance is expensive. You can't afford all that, so you are dead. Even with chemotherapy, guys, all-time top-selling drug, cancer is fed by glucose. Now, your oncologist who has done 15-year training and clinical experience would rather have you sit on a hospital bed covered up with Wi-Fi and your Bluetooth earphones while you're having a nice meal and a nice drink, glucose entering your body, deprived of sunlight, as long as you take chemotherapy, because that is the science that's proven. Chemotherapy reduces the growth of cancer cells. Sunlight, we still need to do a lot of research on that. Glucose, we still need to do a lot of research on that. And I've seen a lot of podcasts on the Diary of a CEO where there's this guy that came in and spoke about how fasting can be the best thing that you can do for yourselves when you have cancer. But you know what? That was attacked so much, including the BBC came through and interviewed qualified doctors and said Stephen Bartlett is spreading misinformation about healthcare. Brah. So the question is, did billionaires monopolize the medical industry? No, they did not. The right question is, did billionaires take advantage of a system and made billions for themselves? Yes, we've seen it, to the point that the only option for you, the type of medicine that your insurance will pay for, is the one that actually just looks at this aspect of health and not everything else, because your insurance company won't even pay for most of the naturopathic medications. And unfortunately, you will never see these herbs getting investigated. Who's going to do it? Who's going to give you billions of dollars to investigate a herb that anyone can find in their backyard? So this is how I want you to think about the Flexner Report and everything else around it. It is a very well-intentioned reform, built on genuinely reasonable standards. However, it still had a devastating, measurable human cost. And that cost is what we're dealing with to this day. If this video made you want to argue with me, good. Put your comments down below. I read every single one of them, and we are going to have a proper dialogue on what you think about this. And if this conversation excites you, there is more where that came from. Hit the subscription button below, because the next time we are getting into the hidden science of light and why you staying indoors, it's what's getting you sick. So until next time, peace.